Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you? I'm sitting here and we're just about to have a big storm here in New York. And I thought, well, why not make a video today? So this is another video about addressing memory, and it's part of my sensory motor psychotherapy series. So this is one that we've actually kind of secretly done in some exercises before, but we're going to put a big highlight on it today. So you could use it more deliberately, use it for various memories that you have. So you could use it for relatively benign things, or you could use it for really painful memories, your choice. You don't have to do it today if you're not up for it, but if you want to just be aware of the technique, I'm going to teach it to you today. It's actually not that hard to understand. So it's just a matter of trying it out when you're ready for it. Okay, here we go. Let's see, where are we? Okay, so this is called dual awareness, past and present. Okay, so I'm just going to start off by answering a question that might be coming to your mind. So just in case, because I know there's probably a few here in the crowd. So if you've been familiar with mindfulness, and especially with DBT house skills, for those of you who are familiar with DBT, there's a concept called one mindfulness, or focusing on one thing at a time. So dual awareness is focusing on two things at a time, the past and the present. So if you're like the girl on the left, who looks a little strangely like me, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute. I thought when we're supposed to be aware, we're supposed to be aware of one thing at a time, not two things at a time, right? However, that's the case when you're practicing mindfulness and you're doing what they call focused attention. So to calm your mind, you might start out by focusing on one thing at a time, such as a mantra, or like one thing in the room that you're focusing on, such as the flame of a candle, or maybe your breath in and out, and that's one thing at a time. And if you focus on that for a while, it helps to calm your mind, and then you could gradually open your attention to other things. Okay, dual awareness is keeping two things in mind at the same time, the past and its impact on yourself in the present, okay? And in order to heal the past, this is one of the important skills that we need to learn how to do, okay? So the wise owl says down here, yes, but to work through bad memories and trauma, we need to experience two things at the same time, past and present, okay? So let's do a little review of our window of tolerance. So if you watched several videos ago, I went over this concept in detail. So hyperarousal on the top is when we feel really revved up, when we feel our heart racing and our body ready for fight or flight. We feel like we're trying to protect ourselves in a mobilized kind of a way. And that might be a reaction you're afraid of experiencing, or that you do experience when you think of a bad memory or a piece of a bad memory. And that might inhibit your willingness to do memory work. On the other hand, if you think about certain elements of your past, you might just kind of, numb out. You may not feel much at all. You might kind of shut down. And that's the hypoarousal end of it. And that might feel very uncomfortable too. And it also might be another reason why you may be reluctant to look at your memories. Okay. Dual awareness helps to keep us in a window of tolerance, because we're recalling just enough of the memory to kind of bring up some of the feelings, whether hyperarousal and or hypoarousal, that come from being aware of the memory. And then we're just aware of how that impacts our body. So when we're aware of that, it's like having one foot in the past and one foot in the present. So we're calling a memory, and we know we're here in the present moment experiencing these physical and mental and emotional responses, okay? And when we're aware of both of these things at the same time, we stay in the window of tolerance. If we're too much in our past and we lose sight of the present, we tend to be hyperaroused or hypoaroused. And when we're in those zones, we can't work through the memory. We have to stay in our window of tolerance in order to work it through and resolve it. So that's why we have to keep the mindfulness of what the impact of the memory is doing to our body. Okay, so that's why we have to recall the past and yet remind ourselves that we're here and observe the effect now. Okay, but don't worry, I will go through examples with you, but hopefully this is starting to make a little bit of sense. Okay, so maybe this sounds familiar. So hyperarousal, reliving painful memories. So ever have something come to mind, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, that's painful from your past, and you think, oh my God, now I feel so overwhelmed that I can't take it. It's just, I'm so hyper aroused. I'm so upset. I'm so anxious. I'm so angry. I can't deal with it, right? And that's a frightening feeling. So that's why sometimes you don't want to get into it, right? We're so absorbed in the experience of the past that we're losing sight of the fact that the past is over and we are in the present. Okay. Sometimes a version of hypoarousal could be like kind of a disconnected intellectual recall. Like you could kind of just matter-of-factly tell the story about something horrible that's happened, but you don't really feel much at all. So you're kind of like the girl there who's thinking, well, I probably should be feeling something about this, but I don't feel anything. I feel kind of numb, right? It seems like something that should be upsetting, but somehow I don't really connect to it. I don't feel that upset right now. And that feels a little strange, okay? So you're recalling the facts, but you have trouble connecting to the visceral feeling, the body sensations of that memory and emotions, obviously, too. Okay, so here's the screenshot, my friends. Whoops, I'm going to move my face here. Okay, so this is the dual awareness diagram, okay, that I'm going to be referring to with you several times from now in various forms. So it goes like this. So in the past, we're going to think of some memory, start to bring it up to mind so we can start to feel it. And then we're going to shift to the right where it says present and notice its impact on our building blocks. So how does it affect our five senses? How is it affecting our thoughts, our emotions, our body sensations? You could use your sensation vocabulary for that one, and the movements that we are making or want to make. And those movements are often tied into things such as fight or flight. So you might have an impulse, like a tightening of a muscle, as if you want to start to run, or as if you want to start to fight. And those are clues to what was going on at the time and some responses maybe that you wanted to make. Okay, there's a sign of a symbol of an anchor down there, because part of the anchoring to the present, anchoring, is noticing things in your environment using your five senses that remind you that the past is over and you're here, okay? So it could be that you're sitting across from your therapist and you're looking in the eyes of your therapist and you realize that somebody else who's safe is with you. Or it could be a matter of feeling your feet on the floor, grounding yourself, things like that. You could be looking around the room, noticing the physical things in the room. Okay, so that's why I drew the anchor somewhere between the present side and the resources side of the bottom. So at any point, if you start to feel dysregulated, you can use the resources that we reviewed in the previous section about building resources. So they're coming in handy again. So we're going to pull them out as needed to help us with this memory work. And you could also remember that you're in control of the process and you could stop at any time. So if you're really uncomfortable or you're not ready, or you thought you're ready and you realize it's too much for today, you can always stop, use your resources to calm down, and walk away from dealing with the memory for now. Okay, so just remember that you're always in control. All right, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about this here. This is not the ultimate screenshot slide, but I just wanted to make sure you had something to take with you. All right, so the past part. Okay, so talking or thinking about the past. So it might involve just, mentally recalling a memory, or it could be involved with talking about the memory with somebody, such as a therapist, okay, or even writing the memory if you're a journaler. And the idea is to recreate the past by embodying the state that you were in at the time. So there's a fancy term for that they use, and they call it state-specific memory. So there's a little bit of procedural memory here, like I'm kind of feeling it physically, and with my emotions, with my thinking, I'm kind of putting myself back into it, not just recalling the words. All right. So as I do that, I'm noticing what that embodiment is doing with my 5 building blocks. So that's over to the present. So notice the effect of remembering on our present experience. Okay. I'm going to stay anchored to my surroundings and to our therapist or trusted friend to help me remember that the past is not happening now. So when we're not resolved with our trauma, we feel on a visceral level, on a physical level, that we're still back in the past, that it's still kind of happening. When trauma is resolved, we start to feel like it's over. And so anchoring in the present is super important because it helps remind us that it's over, all right? And again, the resources, which we could come to at any point. So use your resources whenever you need to regulate. And if you're doing this with somebody, the person you're with, such as your therapist, a friend, might notice that you're getting dysregulated and suggest to you to use your resources. So sometimes others notice it before we do. But if you notice it within yourself, don't feel like, you're failing if you have to stop or use your resources. It's part of the process. It's a good sign that you can tune into yourself and be mindful and know when you need to use a resource, okay? And you could always go back to the dual awareness part, okay? All right. So some benefits of using this, just to inspire us to possibly give it a try. So using dual awareness techniques can help to transform the effect of what happened to us, okay? While we cannot change what happened in the past, we could prevent it from bothering us and upsetting us and triggering us as much as it might right now. And dual awareness is a technique that helps to reshape that. And you might find that after you go back and forth between the past and the present a few different times, it starts to get different. The building blocks aren't triggered in the same kind of a way. Just by observing your building blocks, they start to evolve and change. And adding your resources in the mix to regulate helps them to evolve and change. And so the past doesn't trigger it the same way and it becomes more neutral, okay? So that's how we transform the effect of what happened to us. And by doing that, it creates a whole lot less suffering in our life, okay? If we're constantly triggered by little things that remind us of a painful past, it makes it difficult for us to get through our day or through certain situations or through certain types of relationships. So it's really to our life advantage, to our advantage of living a better life, to work these things through, okay? And another thing is that it gives us the confidence that recalling the past can be manageable. So like I said before, you're always in control of the process. You don't have to always throw yourself into it so much that you get unbearably overwhelmed. You can stop and use your resources at any time. You could stop at any time. So when you realize you have control over the process, it makes you feel like, okay, I could do this. I feel more confident that I could regulate this experience, okay? And that's really a good thing. Okay, so the concept wasn't particularly, lengthy, so we're gonna move right on to the exercises now, all right? And you could try any one of these if you choose. All right, so first of all, don't forget your resources, all right? I have several videos that went over resources in detail, but this is just a quick reminder of what they are. So the top 9, the first 2 rows, were general categories of resources that were reviewed. So relational, somatic, emotional, intellectual, artistic, material, psychological, spiritual, and nature, all right? So if you had done the original exercises, hopefully you made lists of the resources that you have in each of those categories and start to notice how they help you. So this is a perfect time to take out that list and keep it handy and activate your resources and use them as you need them. Okay, and then the bottom 2 rows, which is 7, are examples of somatic resources in particular. So since it's sensory motor psychotherapy, we have to use somatic resources and they actually can be very helpful. So remembering to use your breath to help you regulate, connecting with your back, pushing your back against the chair, for example, putting your feet on the floor to ground yourself, aligning your spine, all right, makes you feel a little bit lighter, a little more confident, less shameful, self-soothing by hugging yourself, rocking, doing certain kind of motions that might feel good to you, using containment, such as feeling your edges, such as wrapping yourself in a blanket, and putting your hand on your heart and your hand on your belly, which is a containment resource, makes you feel, a centering resource. Containment resource was the blanket. This is centering because you're feeling your center and you're feeling less thrown off balance by stress, such as digging up an old memory, okay? So feel free to use these at any time. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna start positive, so it's not too hard. So one thing you could try to do is to think of a positive memory from your past kind of reactivate that in your mind, try to really embody it and feel it, then shift over and notice how it's impacting your building blocks in the present. Chances are you probably will not use resources for this one because it's a good memory, but just in case, you could always activate a good resource or activate a resource for this good memory too, okay? Next, all right, so we can shift to a bad memory. Now remember, it doesn't have to be the worst memory of your whole life. It could be something, you know, a little bit bad if you want to practice, or not so great, but not traumatic, you know, or it could be very traumatic, whatever you're ready for. But I would start small, okay? So think about a bad memory in your past. Again, really try to put yourself there so you could embody it, feel it, sense it, emotion it, okay? Notice the impact on your building blocks in the present, and as necessary, pause to use your resources. Okay, so after you try this with the good and the bad, you could start to think and notice some patterns. All right, so is there a pattern to your general style of remembering and the types of building blocks you notice the most? So for example, in both categories, you happen to be more of a visual rememberer. You happen to be someone who remembers more feelings than thoughts? Or do you think it's like something that was said to you and that stands out? Or does it feel more of like a sensation in your body that you experience, right? Is there something that kind of comes up more than something else in terms of your building blocks, okay? And also, do the building blocks that are activated vary depending on whether it's a good memory or a bad memory, okay? So is the good memories something that are more cognitive, for example, more thinking, but you don't feel much of it? And the bad memory is something you feel very, very strongly, but there's not a lot of words to it. That might be a pattern, but it may not be your pattern. You might have a very different pattern, okay? How might you use what you learned when you want to recall something difficult or positive in the future? Okay, so what are these insights telling you? Okay, so are there certain building blocks that might help you stay in your window of tolerance? So, for example, if you think of a bad memory and it's mostly uncomfortable physical sensations, would orienting to certain things that you see in the present help you stay more grounded? Would it be easier to think it in words? Would it be easier to do something different, right? Focus on a different type of building block, and would that make you feel better? Okay. And if, let's say, the good memories aren't something you feel as strongly, but you want to feel them more strongly so you feel the goodness of the past better, are there things you could focus on in your building blocks that will help you feel them more intensely? You know, is it better to focus on more of the 5 senses of that past experience, and that'll help you feel it more intensely with that good memory, and that'll be something positive for you? All right, so think about that. You have some control over which building block you choose to focus on. Okay, next, embodying a state-specific distressing memory and being mindful. Okay, so it is, yes, it is kind of similar to this one, but they do bring it up again this way, so I'm going to do what they do. So this one's just straight up bringing up your distressing memory, really feeling it, embodying it, thinking about your building blocks in the present. This time they also add on focusing on something that you could anchor yourself into in the present moment to stay in your window of tolerance. So in addition to noticing what the memory is doing to you, notice things such as, you know, objects in the room, sounds that you hear, the person that you're with, if you're with a person, okay? Sensations of your body in the chair, okay? Things like that that help remind you that you're in the present moment. And of course, use your resources as needed. Okay, so dual awareness of a recent interpersonal conflict. All right, so we're not digging deep into the old past, but we're remembering something recently, maybe an argument you had with somebody, or feeling rejected by somebody, or feeling that someone was criticizing you, or something that just didn't feel right interpersonally. Okay, so they call it an upsetting, unresolved interpersonal conflict. Okay, so think about that. May not be too hard to remember since it just happened. Focus on your building blocks in the present, use your resources as needed. Okay, next little interesting twist to this one is when you think about the effect of that recent interpersonal conflict on your building blocks now, does it remind you of a past interpersonal conflict that you had? So are you activating a procedural memory of something from the past? Okay. When you were arguing with your boss, did the boss remind you of your older brother and how he used to criticize you? Like, was it something like that? Like, is one thing reminding you of something else and you were kind of acting it out in the present, reliving it in the present, but it really was something that originated in the past? So all that kind of concept is outlined in the recent video I did about procedural memory, okay? But this is pretty much, they're trying to integrate that concept into here. All right, so describe one or more earlier interpersonal conflicts that are similar to this current conflict. All right, next, a little more challenging perhaps, dual awareness of an upsetting childhood memory. Okay, so think about something upsetting in your past that happened when you were a kid. It could be something from your family, something from school, like whatever it is for you, okay? So recall just enough of it that you could start to embody what it's like. So you don't have to recall every detail from beginning to end, just whatever enough so that you start to feel it, okay? It could be something somebody said to you. It could be a look that you got from somebody. It could be a flash of an image that does it, or it could be a little bit more, but just whatever gets you to there, okay? In the next video, we're going to talk about using what they call a slice of memories. So this is a kind of a preview for that. So just enough to get you to feel those building blocks, okay? And then notice the impact on your present experience. So what does that past experience do to your present building blocks? Then we're going to take a few minutes to mindfully look around your environment and orient to your surroundings. So this is helping you remember that you are in the present, that while the past is being activated in you, you are still in this room, you are safe right now, you're here, you're an adult, right? And all those things, reminders, start to help to reshape that memory, okay? So it should have some kind of impact on the way the memory is experienced when you are anchoring yourself in the present, all right? And of course, use your resources as needed. All right, so then we're going to also look a little bit at the procedural memory aspect here. So are there any situations in your life today that you experience similarly to this childhood memory, maybe similar building blocks that are activated, or that remind you of this childhood memory? Okay, chances are there really might be, because, you know, when we had that strong impact from the past, we start to see certain current situations through the lens of that old experience. And we start to have procedural memory and an acting out and embodying of the old in the present, right? So just kind of keep that in mind, and maybe that'll help give you some new connections that you're making or some new insights. Okay, so next is, if you think about a memory that you try to avoid, one that maybe you don't feel that strongly, perhaps because you're more in the hypoarousal zone, where it's more intellectual, maybe you could kind of describe what it is, but you don't feel much about it. Okay, so the next few slides are for that. Okay, so think about a childhood memory you detach from or avoid. So notice how the experience of recalling that impacts your building blocks in the present. And then another thing to notice is, are you doing anything with your building blocks that's kind of helping to keep the memory at bay? So for example, are you tensing against the memory, kind of almost preventing yourself from feeling it too strongly, or preventing yourself from losing control? Are you keeping a stiff upper lip? Are you clenching your teeth? Are you tightening your muscles? Are you restricting your breathing? Is there anything in your building blocks that you notice that's keeping the memory distant? Okay, once you notice that, if you want to try to deepen the memory and feel it more, you need to do the opposite. So if you notice yourself tensing against the memory, you need to open to the memory. If you notice holding your breath, try to deepen your breath. Okay, so you have to physically open to it to allow yourself to feel it. Okay, it can't just be a cognitive thing. It has to be an embodied thing where your body is allowing for the memory. Okay, So this is a continuation of that slide. So as you're trying to deepen the memory, one thing you could do is maybe think of a part of it, a slice of it, where it's a little bit more painful than the other parts. So you might be numb to most of it, but maybe there's a part that is a little bit more triggering. So you want to expand upon that part and try to elaborate on it by thinking about, what was that scene like? What were the surroundings like? What were the colors I was seeing? Who were the people? What did they look like? What did they sound like? What were the facial expressions like? How were they moving? Or whatever it is that could deepen that slightly more intense slice of that memory. Okay, and that'll help you emotionally and physically get there more. Okay, and help you deepen it. Okay, so as you continue to focus on these painful elements of the memory, think about what movements you want to make. So specifically look at that particular building block. Okay, so sometimes you might notice, like, let's say your foot is flexing, or you might feel a tension in your hands or a tension in your legs. Just focus on that for a minute and see, what is it trying to do? Is your legs tensing because part of you is thinking, I need to run away? Or your fist clenching because part of you thinks, I need to fight back? And so that's a clue to what could be going on. So maybe you had fight or flight impulses that you never were able to finish at that point. Okay, so to deepen the memory more, try to exaggerate those movements and do it. So if you feel your hand just clenching a little bit, maybe just see what it wants to do. Does it want to punch, or does your legs want to move? And start to do it, but slowly. So what does it feel like now if I'm doing that movement? Or if I'm starting to move my legs back and forth in my chair, or stand up and run in place, or walk in place? How does that start to affect the other building blocks, right? Has that helped to bring more life to this memory? Okay, and that's it. Actually, another tip I forgot to mention earlier. I'm just going to scroll up real fast here. Sorry, guys. I apologize for forgetting about this. Kind of was important. There we go. So I just wanted to go back to this diagram. So they say that when we do these exercises, it's important for us to get into just enough into that hyperarousal zone. So activate just enough of the memory so I'm out of my window of tolerance and I'm feeling these things more intensely. And when I put the dual awareness in there and I'm aware of how this hyperarousal is affecting my building blocks, it kind of keeps me in the window of tolerance more, but I have to first activate it so that it's intense enough that it's doing something. Because if I'm too safe, if I'm too neutral about it, it's not going to help to reshape the memory. I have to like go there a little bit. But if I have enough control of the process through using my building blocks and my mindfulness and dual awareness, it will get back into the window of tolerance and stay manageable. And it'll help me to get out of that hyperarousal zone as needed. Okay, so when we do that last exercise, and we're talking about hypoarousal, we're never going to resolve the memory if we stay down there. We have to find a way to bring it up and bring it enough so we feel it and get it into hyperarousal so that we can then work it through. Okay, and the fight or flight are mobile defenses that are in hyperarousal. If we stay in the freeze and fold mode in hypoarousal, we're never going to really get traction here. Okay, so just a little tip. Okay, all right, so that's it. We made it. Okay, thank you for listening. I hope this will be a technique that helps you, and I will see you again for more memory information in the next video. All right, thanks everybody.